Star Wars Visions is one of my favorite new Star Wars ventures. It's a series that allows for independent animation studios to create new and interesting stories based on the franchise we've grown to love. Despite some major problems, I really fell in love with some of the shorts in Visions Season 1 and 2, which is why I was really excited when Season 3 was announced, with a number of follow-ups to some of the original shorts in Season 1. However, despite my excitement, the response to Volume 3 of Star Wars Visions has been pretty mild. So today we're going to take a look at every episode of Volume 3 and review them in 100 words or less. The Duel Payback really feels like an Akira Kurosawa movie, however, in regards to the story, that's not really a good thing. The plot of the film basically follows the plot of Seven, which Star Wars already ripped off in an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars. I liked the short overall, but I felt like the fight at the end was pretty pointless. It didn't do anything interesting and kinda just ended on a whimper. Despite that though, the Grandmaster was a super menacing villain, and his final scene was done perfectly in my opinion. This episode felt really confused. There was so much thematic potential that kinda just got steamrolled in the execution. The idea of music is so prevalent and beautiful throughout the film, with the song that Crane's mom sang to her as a kid being remixed into her current electropop style, showing how Crane carries her mom's lesson with her into the future. But the soundtrack overall is a bit messy, with the bouncing electronic beats making it hard to accept the fact that Lupus's entire family literally just died. Overall, there was way too much action and way too little emotion. This is my least favorite short by a landslide. The Ninth Jedi feels like a Star Wars fanfiction in the worst ways. The visual design is so antithetical to the language of this franchise, and it really just seems like this short has absolutely no unique ideas. The story structure is so basic and derivative, and while Teto is charming, he's ultimately just like any other mascot droid. Kara's ultimate journey is that she's bad with the Force, and then she goes, oh wait, shoot, I should try harder, and then she's good at the Force. I instantly fell in love with both of these characters. The writing for Seven and the droid is just so well done, and it adds perfectly to the story about freedom and morality, with Seven eventually deciding to live by her own version of justice. The twist in the middle of the short is so obvious that it isn't even really a twist, but honestly I'm fine with that for a short like this. Overall, this film was not perfect, but it manages to tell a complete and earnest story and has a lot of fun while doing it. A very simple short about two kids fighting against a band of pirates. The tone is universally light, which keeps the story really fun and inviting. I never expected this film to end sadly, but I was okay with that since the characters are all just so cute and simple. The pacing and writing of this short was really tight throughout, and I actually got a lot out of it despite how small scale it was. Overall, the found family and narrative throughline was just good enough and complemented how cute and silly this world was. The soundtrack and overall quality of the short make the few inconsistencies of this film hit a lot harder. The emotional core was definitely there, and Kevin Penkin is undoubtedly a national treasure, but I feel like the exceptional elements of this film could have been set up better. There's a couple shots which feel like they're just straight up missing or cut incorrectly, and the whole resurrection thing being not explained at all was a bit confusing. Village Bride was my favorite short in the first season, so maybe I was expecting too much, but this episode is just alright. Studio Trigger's entry for this season was not at all what I expected. Trigger is known for being extreme in every regard, but this film is a pretty massive departure from that. It's a small-scale story about the prince of a very visually interesting nation trying to escape his empire-occupied homeworld. This one felt the most like it could have been a TV show pilot. I found the setting and characters to be really charming, and while the short doesn't take any big swings, it bats pretty consistently across the board. The Bird of Paradise is weird. It has some of the highest highs and lowest lows of the entire season. The animation looks gorgeous as a still frame, but in motion something just feels a bit off about it, and while the story is by far my favorite in the show, I feel like it was executed so strangely. The title cards and occasionally weird writing take away from what is an absolutely heartbreaking story. I feel like if this short took itself more seriously and was just executed better, it could have been my favorite by a country mile. If you want my full thoughts, you should check out the video I just made about the short, but to say it simply, Black is a film that is artistically perfect. It is undoubtedly incredible to look at, and it has by far some of the most creative imagery in the entire franchise. Yet as a film that is meant to entertain, I feel like it was kept artificially abstract in a way that really takes away from the story. It gets a perfect score artistically and a 5 out of 10 for enjoyment, so we're just gonna have to split the difference. And that's all of them. Since we got through that so fast, I'm gonna give myself a bit more time to talk about my favorite and least favorite short. Starting with my least favorite, I really disliked The Ninth Jedi, Child of Hope, and I'm surprised to see that I'm in the minority for that. First of all, this film is just really ugly overall. The animation style for the 2D animated sections is alright, but this film insists on using so much CG, and it all just looks awful. Like, I understand animation is hard and takes time, like, gosh, I can't even imagine how much work has to go into a single second of animation. But if Kinema Citrus was able to animate not one, but 2 full shorts and have them both look amazing, I feel like you have to be able to do a little bit better. And even aside from the raw animation quality, the design language of this film felt so wrong. The whole point of Visions is to allow creators to put their own unique spin on Star Wars, to push the franchise forward by injecting new ideas. But these ideas still have to exist within the world of Star Wars. If you look at the droids and ships in any of the other shorts, they're clearly new. They have designs that haven't been seen before in this franchise. But they're still taking time and effort to pay homage to some of the design habits of the Star Wars franchise. And so they still feel cohesive, like they belong in this type of story. In contrast to that, the ships and droids in Child of Hope feel so foreign to the visual language of Star Wars. They're weirdly shiny and clean and have a very uncanny feel to them. Star Wars is a dystopia, and you can see that reflected in the grimy exterior of its ships. They all follow certain guidelines which make sense of their place in the story. This short doesn't seem to care about any of that, and frankly the payoff for breaking those conventions doesn't make this choice worth it in the slightest. The strangest thing about how little reverence this short seems to have for Star Wars design is that the story is possibly the most basic Star Wars narrative I have ever heard. It's literally about a Jedi who's being hunted who gets separated from her friends and meets a quirky droid. And over the course of a few minutes, she learns a valuable lesson about trusting in the Force or something. And then the droid dies. Star Wars has so much to pull from as a series. There's so many cool places to explore, but this short does nothing. It makes absolutely no choices that set it apart from any other pre-existing Star Wars media. And I just can't wrap my head around it. There's just simply no emotional core to this story. It almost seems like it's going to be a short about Cara learning to use the Force and being traumatized by the way her dad is taken from her. But it's not. Cara remembers her father telling her to basically try harder, and then she does, and is able to move this big rock using the Force. And then it feels like there's going to be an emotional moment or parallel between Teto and his master and Cara and her father, but that also never really goes anywhere. And the two of them have a random conversation about the essence of war and why people fight each other, and like, none of it works. What astounded me so much is that in the director's commentary for the short, the director of The Child of Hope talked about how this film was meant to set up the future of the story. How basically this was meant to showcase how Cara awakened her determination and resolve. And I think that goal comes across in the film. This could very well be a serviceable middle episode to a 3-part miniseries. But that's not what Star Wars Visions are supposed to be. These shorts should be able to stand by themselves and not be reliant on what came before and what may come after. Even the other sequels in this season have merit as their own standalone stories. But The Child of Hope just doesn't. It doesn't carve an emotional identity for itself, and it doesn't try to say anything interesting as its own short film. And maybe one day when The Ninth Jedi Part 3 comes along, this film will be given more worth as a setup to the events of that episode. But frankly, if that's the only thing that will give this story meaning, I sincerely think this is a very poor use of an episode. Ending on a more simple and positive note, I just really liked The Bounty Hunters. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised that this was my favorite short too, because I really wanted to like The Lost Ones. Kevin Penkin is my favorite composer of all time, and I found the story and general quality of The Village Bride to be top-notch. But The Lost Ones is just not as good. It has some really incredible moments, and the emotions of the short are all there. I just think it could have used another 10 minutes to tell its story in full. I did a huge deep dive on Resurrection and Star Wars and honestly ended up more confused than when I started, so I do wish that was explained a tiny bit better, because honestly I was a bit distracted during the entirety of the climax by just wondering how and why this guy came back to life. Anyways, this section isn't about The Lost Ones, so I digress. The Bounty Hunters is a very simple but effective story. First of all, the writing in this short is super tight. There's a general rule of thumb that I came up with when grading the writing in Visions. If the short includes any Star Wars slang in its exchanges, the writing is good, and if it doesn't, then the writing is most likely bad. And that holds true for pretty much every short in the series, especially this one. 7 and IVA-4 just immediately have an interesting and well-characterized dynamic. Their banter while escaping from the other bounty hunters was super well done and immediately endeared me to both of them. And just overall, it doesn't feel like there's a single line of wasted dialogue in the entire film. The argument at the start of the film sets up the main conflict between 7 and IVA-4 that continues throughout the story, and 7's backstory is explained briefly in the same scene where she's hired for a new job. It all just flows together really well and helps tell a complete narrative. There were definitely some parts that I wasn't fond of. I think the mid-episode breakup between Seven and IVA4 was kind of pointless and cliche. I think it was set up well enough and that there was clearly some animosity between the two of them, but it could have been executed with more tact, or better yet just cut and replaced by the main characters having a heart-to-heart. But the moment where IVA4 returns was fun, so I guess it wasn't a complete failure. In addition to that, the short almost tries to pull off a plot twist with the rich CEO actually being a slave owner and generally bad dude. But it's very obvious from the get-go that this is where the story is heading. So honestly, if anyone got surprised by this plot twist, I don't really get how. But to that end, I do think that it was a better choice to make this twist so stupidly obvious from the get-go. Plot twists in short films just generally don't go well, since the short doesn't have enough time to set up the twist or pay it off. So the reveal kind of works as the moment that Seven learns about Jin being evil, even though we as the audience kinda already knew. Aside from those things, I just think the short was executed really well from top to bottom. Seven's emotional journey is really clean and consistent throughout the entire film, with her decision to put her own justice first coming in a moment that makes a lot of sense for her. At first, it may seem like her choice to fight against the CEO came out of nowhere, but the short is very clever with how they set things up. They immediately make it clear that Seven relates to or sympathizes with the slaves, since she herself was forced to wear a slave collar while working for Basham. And in addition to that, the moment that convinces Seven to switch sides is when she learns that the rebels are orphans that have siblings that are being held captive by Jin, which would be really important to her as an orphan herself. Just little things like that are all over this short that make the story really effective overall. The film doesn't try for anything too crazy, but it excels at the few things that it does choose to focus on. And to me, that's enough to put it over a lot of the other films in this season. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this format, please let me know. I basically ripped off this style of video from Jello Apocalypse, so huge shout out to his original videos for inspiring this. His videos were always about reviewing stuff in 10 words or less, but I wanted a bit more of a chance to elaborate on my opinions, so I made it 100. Also, I'm not even close to as good at writing comedy as he is, so I'm not sure I could make this shorter format work. Either way though, I thought this would be a fun way to talk about the newest season of Visions. If you want more stuff like this, make sure to let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.